Hello everyone and welcome back. Okay, in this chapter we're going to talk about a very important concept in JavaScript, and that is objects, okay? We can create objects in JavaScript. So what is an object? Well, an object really can be anything, and I'm not trying to be vague or be funny when I say that. I'm going to give you some examples here. So one I always like to use is, well, okay, an object is like a real world representation of something. It can be your favorite movie, it can be a YouTube video, it could even be a car, okay? And objects, the key thing to note here is that objects have both properties and they have methods, okay? So we've seen this before with arrays. We saw with arrays, one property they have is the length property. You can access the length of an array, and they have methods. There's different methods you can use on an array, okay, such as push, pop, reverse, etc. Now, when we talk about, let's say, a car in the real world, okay, a car will have various properties. It will have the year it was made. It will have a color. It will have seats, how many passengers it can carry, etc. But it will also have methods. So while properties are characteristics, methods are things the object can do. In this case, a car can drive, right? So it can start, it can stop, it can beep, and it can turn, okay? So cars can do things, right? So cars will have properties, the size of the car, the year it was made, the color, etc., and it can do things. It can turn, it can reverse, it can beep, it can drive, etc. So the key point is that objects, okay, basically have properties and methods, okay? Now, another way to think about this is movies. Movies will have various properties. They'll have a title of the movie, the year it was made, the cast, who's the lead actress, the lead actor, etc. What are the reviews like online, okay? So movies are also objects. So you can create an object that represents a real world movie. And how you create an object, and that's what we'll get to now, because I suppose it's hard conceptually to understand what an object is if you haven't seen one. You can create an object using what we call object literal notation. Don't be intimidated by that. Object literal notation basically means the syntax for creating an object. And really what we do is we use curly braces, and inside of it we can put all the other different data types. So an object can contain strings, such as a name. It can contain numbers, such as an age. It can contain Boolean values, so true and false. It can even contain arrays, okay? So an object is a very powerful data type in JavaScript. What I want to do is I want to create an object for Batman. So if we say let Batman be equal to, and curly braces, what we can do in here is we can put all the different properties that we can think of for Batman. And how you do that is you do it with a key value pair, okay? So you have the name, okay, so this is going to be a property, okay? And we need to give it a value, and that will be Bruce Wayne. And what you can do inside of an object is you can comma separate all of the different pieces of data, okay? So that's name, and that is the value, okay? So this is known as a key value pair, okay? Now, you can also do a number. So for example, age 38. How I decided his age was 38 was, that was roughly the age that Christian Bale was when he shot some of the Batman movies. I went back to 2012. I'm not sure if The Dark Knight came out in 2010 or 2012 or 11, but he was roughly 38 back then. Okay, then he has an address he's going to live at. So this can be Wayne Manor, comma separate. Okay, awesome. Then you can have a workplace. Okay, so workplace, you could say Wayne Enterprises. So the key point I'm trying to make here is that an object can contain different data types. So for example, maybe his relationship status, so is single, we could set that to true. So we have here, apologies, force a habit. So we have strings, now we have a Boolean, we have a number here as well, okay? So various things you could do. We could also have an email. So we'll put in another string here, and that could be Bruce at WayneEnterprises.com, and comma separate there. Okay. You could also have another Boolean. So does Batman have powers? We could say has powers. You could set that one to be false, because technically, while he's a superhero, Batman is a human. Bruce Wayne, he doesn't actually have powers. You could also create an array, okay? So you could say maybe hobbies, okay? So what are his hobbies? Well, maybe he likes drinking coffee, okay? Maybe he likes visiting Venice. I don't know if that's true, but you know, he's a rich guy. Um, Going to restaurants. Can't spell restaurants, can I? Restaurants. We'll just say going to cafes. And what else? Wandering the streets at night, you know, because, you know, he's a night owl. Wandering the streets at night and solving crime. Okay. Key point here is we now have an array as well. Also, you could do another array if you wanted of friends. So maybe he hangs around with, let's say, Robin, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and of course, Superman. Okay. So basically, this here, what we've done is we've actually created an object that represents Batman. So you have name with a value of a string, you have age of type number, you have 3 strings here, so address, workplace, email, you have some Boolean values, so true and false values, and we have here 2 arrays. And what I can do is, if I log out Batman to the console, if I say console.log Batman, we should see all of these key value pairs, i.e. properties, logged out to the console. Okay? So for example, if I expand it, we see here we have address, we have age, email, friends there has powers. Okay? Now, one thing I want you to think about, thinking ahead here for this course, is the reason this is so cool is, imagine later on you want to set up an app, whether it's a weather app or an app for movies or stock market data app. You might want to set up some code that actually sends a request to a database or an API and gets data back. And typically, you know, if you want to be able to access different properties and methods in an object, you're going to have to understand objects and how to access data. Okay, so that's what we'll talk about in the next tutorial. The key takeaway from this tutorial is, number 1, objects exist in JavaScript. So what is an object? Well, this is an object here. An object is a representation of something that exists in the real world. So it can be a movie, it can be a YouTube video, it could be a car, it can even be a person. Okay, a person will have a name, an age, a date of birth, an address, nationality, all of those kind of things. And the key point here as well is that while we've seen now in this course how you can create an array using square bracket notation, you know, for example, let cities be equal to, and then square brackets and commas separate the cities. With object literal notation, we use curly braces. So here we said let Batman be equal to, and we've assigned it the value of an object. We have our opening curly brace here and our closing curly brace there. I put a semicolon there to end basically the statement or this piece of code. And inside of the object, we have our key value pairs, okay? All the different properties, and I've comma separated. Technically, you don't need a comma there at the end because there's nothing after the friends array, but it's okay to put it if you want. And then what we did is we just logged out Batman, i.e. this object, to the console, and we saw it there. In the next tutorial, what I'll do is I'll show you how to access the properties of an object. Also as well, you don't just have to have properties in an object, you could also, for example, put in a method, okay? Okay, so in the last tutorial we saw what an object was, and we saw that we could actually create an object using object literal notation. In this tutorial, what I want to do is I want to show you how you can essentially access the properties of an object, okay? So down here, we said console.log Batman to log out the object to the console, and this is what we get. We get the object. But what if you want to access very specific properties of the object? Well, I was going to say array there. I'm so used to talking about arrays. Well, we've seen previously that we can access the length property of an array by saying array name dot length. Okay, so previously we've seen, you know, let cities be equal to, we'll create an array, we'll just put in Paris and maybe Madrid. We don't do Madrid enough. Okay, awesome. And we know that we can access the length property of cities by saying cities dot length, okay? and that will log out, I believe, 2 to the console because there's 2 cities in our array. Awesome. But the key point here is we've actually used dot notation. We've taken the name of the array and used dot notation, i.e. a dot, to access the length property. And that is the same concept and one way you can actually access various key value pairs or properties inside of an object. So if I want to log out the name of Bruce Wayne, I can say console.log Batman, so the name of the object, and then using dot notation access the name of the property I want to log out to the console. And this should give us Bruce Wayne. And if I save and refresh, we get Bruce Wayne. Okay, awesome. So what I did was I logged out the name of the object, and then using dot notation I was able to access the name property. Okay, I'm just going to basically undo that, and now we're just getting the entire object again. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to give you a challenge. I want you to log out to the console Bruce's email. Okay, just imagine this was data coming in from an API and you were seeing it for the first time. Well, what you know is the object has a name, so you can access the email property by using .email. Okay, so what we could do here is we could say console.log. What is the name of the object? Well, it's Batman. I'll paste that there. And using dot notation, we want to access the email. Okay, Batman.email. And then what will happen is this should log out the value of the email to the console. So let's save and refresh. And we get Bruce at WayneEnterprises.com. Okay, awesome. The other cool thing as well is you'll notice that there are 2 arrays inside of the object. So maybe we want to get a better understanding for some reason of Batman's hobbies. So we could say console.log. And then what we can do is we can say Batman.hobbies. Okay? And this is going to give us the hobbies array logged out to the console. So if we refresh, we see here we get the array of all the various hobbies. And what you could do is you could actually access drinking coffee. So you don't have to access the entire array if you don't want to. You could do Batman.hobbies, and then we know how to access the first element of an array at the 0 index. So now, instead of logging out hobbies to the console, that will log out drinking coffee. Okay, so what we did was we access the first element in the array. Okay, so this is really cool. You're able to access the different properties of an array using dot notation. Just one last one for you. Can you log out Wonder Woman? For some reason, I want you to log out Wonder Woman. How would you do it? Well, you know you have to log out the name of the console, then use dot notation to get friends, and Wonder Woman is at this position in the array, so 0, 1, 2. Okay, so what you could do now is you could say console.log Batman.friends at index 2, and that will give us the value of Wonder Woman. And if I save and refresh, if I can find the console, here we go. We get Wonder Woman. Okay, awesome. Another cool thing you can do as well is, in addition to accessing the different properties of the object, you can also change the value of properties in the object. So for example, just to prove this to you, if I console.log Bruce's relationship status, or Batman's relationship status, if I say Batman dot is single, right, what do we get? Well, we're going to get true. Batman is single. But what I could do is, you don't just have to log stuff out of the console, we could actually update the value of that if we wanted to. So we don't need to redeclare a variable, say let anything. That property already exists. What I could do is I could simply say Batman dot is single and assign that the value of false, the Boolean false. What I'm doing is I'm now saying that Batman is actually now not single. He's in a relationship now. And that has actually updated the value of the object. If I say console.log now, let's say Batman, I'll log out the entire object. Let me just comment all that out. Okay, so if I log out the entire object now, what do we get? Well, we see isSingle is now set to false. Okay, and then we can just access that very specific property. So instead of logging out the entire object, let's log out isSingle, and what we should get is false. So that's pretty amazing because we've defined or created an object here using object literal notation, and what we were able to do was we were actually able to access a property in the object and override its value. So the key point is that using dot notation you can access different properties inside of an object. So console.log batman.name would give you Bruce Wayne, console.log batman.age would give you 38, but you can also override the value of properties inside of an object. Okay, key point for this tutorial is you can access properties of an object using dot notation. All you need to do is just type out the object name and then dot and then whatever property that it is you're looking to access. Okay, so in the last tutorial we saw how we can access different properties of an object using dot notation, but what I'd also like to let you know is that you can also access the properties of an object or the key value pairs using square bracket notation. So it's a bit different to how you access data inside of an array. So we've seen now many times, you know what, we'll stick with superheroes. We'll say let heroes be equal to, and we have Superman, Wonder Woman, and we have Batman. Okay, so we've seen previously that if you want to access the first element of an array, you need to access the array name at index of 0 because arrays start counting at 0. So this would be heroes square bracket 0, close the square bracket, heroes at index 1, and heroes at index 2. So for example, we just say console.log heroes, and let's do 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we know at 0 that'll be Superman, at 1 it's Wonder Woman, and 2 it's Batman. So we have 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so it's going to be Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman. So if I save and refresh, we get Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman. Awesome. Now, when you are accessing properties of an object, it's not the same as this here. So arrays start counting at 0, so we know it's array name at 0, at 1, at 2. Objects don't work like that. So if I was to try, you know, say console.log Batman at index 0, well, I'll tell you what, let's try it. Console.log, let's say Batman, the name of our object at index 0. Let's see what happens. Okay. We get undefined. Okay, we get undefined. And that is because if you want to access a key value pair or a property inside of an object, you have to basically pass in the key inside of strings that you're looking for. So Batman, and I have my quotes there at name, that will now log out the property of name. Okay, so Bruce Wayne is the value for the name property. So this one log out to the console Bruce Wayne. So if I save and refresh, we get Bruce Wayne. Okay, awesome. So obviously, if you wanted to do that using dot notation, you could. It is a little bit easier, I find. So it's just console.log batman.name. Okay, so the syntax is slightly shorter, but that gives you the same thing. So two different ways to access the same key value pair or property inside of an object. And when I say key value pair, this is the key and this is the value, and together they are a pair. Okay, so name is a property, and that is the value. Bruce Wayne is the value of the property that we have defined or called name. Okay, so one last thing as well is you can use the square bracket notation to change the value of a property inside of the object. So for example, what I could do is I could update Batman's age. Maybe it's his birthday, so we could say Batman, and then I'll pass in inside of quotes age and assign that a value of 39. And now if I console.log Batman, I could do Batman.age, But let's do Batman age like so, because this tutorial is about square bracket notation. So the age has been updated to 39. Okay, awesome. So for this course, I will be using dot notation to access properties of an object, but I just want you to be aware that you can also use square. Okay, so in this tutorial, what we're going to do is we are going to create a function inside of the Batman object. And traditionally in JavaScript, when you have a function that's built into JavaScript, it is called a method. We've seen methods before. So for example, when we use document.write, that is a method. Console.log as well. The log is available to us on the console. Also, when you create a function inside of an object, we traditionally refer to that as a method, okay? So if I was to create a function inside of the Batman object, we will refer to that as a method. So how do we do that? Well, let's create a method inside of the object where when the function or method is called or invoked, it just logs out to the console, Batman is driving fast in the Batmobile. So far we have our key value pairs, we have our various properties, we've given them all names and they have some sort of value. It's the same concept for a method in the object. So we're going to say drive, this is going to be a key value pair and the value is going to be a function, and we'll just create a function with no arguments or parameters. So basically it is just going to be function, curly braces, and we're just going to log out to the console, you know, Batman is driving fast in the Batmobile. Batmobile. I hope I'm spelling that correctly. I apologize if I'm not. Okay, so we've defined our method inside of our Batman object. Nothing happens because I haven't logged out the drive method, or I haven't called or invoked it. Okay, so if I was to log out to the console Batman, the entire object, what should happen now is we should see that there is this inbuilt method here. So if we just do the drop down, so we see here we have drive and we have this little f and then parentheses. Okay, so if we expand that, what we can see here is we have a function, no arguments are defined, so that's null, and basically it just has drive. So you know that if you want to access, for example, Bruce's name, you would say console.log, or Batman's name, sorry, you'd say Batman, the name of the object, dot name, okay? And that will log out Bruce's name to the console, okay? So how do we access the function? Well, we don't want to log out a function. What we do is we want to call or invoke it. So we're going to use similar syntax here. What we're going to do is we're going to say Batman dot, and you'll notice here we have access to drive, that inbuilt method inside of the Batman object. And how do we call or invoke a function? We've seen this many times. You write out the name of the function and invoke it with parentheses. And what this is doing is we're saying Batman, we're accessing the Batman object and then calling or invoking the drive method. And if we save and refresh, we get Batman is driving fast in the Batmobile. You could also create another function, maybe we'll call it like fight Joker. So we could say fight Joker. You don't have to use the function keyword, by the way. You could do an arrow function, so an anonymous inline arrow function, a function with no name. And basically what we could do is we could just alert Batman has defeated the Joker. Okay, but you kind of have to ask yourself, why did the Joker become bad? Maybe Gotham didn't really look after him, but that's a different story. Okay, so that is how we call or invoke the Batman.drive function or method. So how do we call or invoke the fight Joker? Well, same concept. Type out the name of the function, use dot notation to access all the inbuilt properties and methods. And remember, when I say method, I'm just referring to a function that was defined or created inside of the Batman object. So it's fight Joker, and then I want to use parentheses to call or invoke it, and semicolon to save. And now when I refresh the browser, we get Batman has defeated the Joker. Okay, awesome. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Here, what we did is we defined a key value pair drive, which was assigned the value of a function. So when you call or invoke the drive method, we just logged out Batman is driving fast in the Batmobile. And then we also did another function. This time we didn't use the keyword function. we just did an arrow function, anonymous, with no name for the function basically. And then when you call or invoke the fight Joker method, we just alert out Batman has defeated the Joker. Okay, awesome. I hope that wasn't too complicated. The key point here though is that you are able to create methods inside of an object in JavaScript, okay? And all you need to do to call or invoke a function or a method, more specifically, that was defined inside of an object, is just type out the name of the object, use dot notation, type out the name of the method you're trying to call or invoke, and use parentheses. Okay, friends, welcome back. In this tutorial, I just wanted to make a very small tutorial where I teach you about the this keyword in JavaScript. So what I've done is I've created a method in the Batman object called log this. It is assigned the value of a function, and all it does is just log out this, the keyword, to the console. So if we want to call or invoke a method built onto an object, what we can do is we can just type out the name of the object itself, use dot notation to access the properties and methods, and search for log this. It is a method, so we have to use parentheses to call or invoke that method there on the Batman object. So if I now save and refresh, what do you think happens when we log out the this keyword in JavaScript? What actually happens is we get a reference to the object within which it was created. So that is the this keyword in JavaScript. When you log out the this keyword, it is a reference to the object itself, the object within which it was created. And to prove that to you, if I just create a very small object for Superman, and we'll say name is Clark Kent, we'll say age is, just say 34, and lastly let's just do workplace. We'll say the Daily Planet, the Daily Planet. Now, if you were to create another function here, we're going to call our method log this again, and it'll just be a function that quite simply just logs out to the console the this keyword. Well, if we call and invoke log this on the Batman object, what we get is a reference to the Batman object. So if we were to call the same method, but that method is now on the Superman object, so if I say Superman dot log this, okay, so remember, log this is just a method that's built in here. We've created it inside of the Superman object. So here what we're doing is we're just logging out to the console the this keyword. So now I'm calling and invoking the log this method that's inbuilt onto the Superman object. And if I save and refresh, we actually get a reference to the Clark Kent object. So the this keyword is very useful to know if you're going on to learn a front-end framework such as React. The this keyword is very powerful, getting reference to an object and then making reference to something within that object, okay? So key point is that the this keyword is a reference to the object within which it was created. It's all about context. And just lastly, if in the root of the JavaScript document, I just log out the this keyword, so this is the global this, it's not this inside of an object, it's within the root of the JavaScript document, what we actually get is a reference to the window object itself. Okay? And you see here, there's an awful lot of stuff you have access to inside of that. So key point about this tutorial is please be aware that the this keyword exists in JavaScript and it is a reference to the object within which it was created. We saw that whereby when we create a method log this and we simply log out the this keyword to the console, what do we get? Well, we get a reference to what we get is the object itself. Okay? Awesome. Okay, just something to keep in the back of your mind. Okay, so in this tutorial, I just want to show you how you can iterate over an array of objects using the for each method in JavaScript. So being able to iterate over an array of objects is quite important because if you're making some sort of real world application, maybe you're asking the YouTube API for data, you want to make a YouTube clone, or you're sending a request to get data back from, you're trying to make a music streaming service. A lot of the time, whether it's a weather app, a stock market app, a streaming app, or a music app, a lot of the time the data is going to come back in the form of an array that contains objects. So being able to iterate over each object in an array is a very powerful skill to have. So one thing you can do is you can use the for each method. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and created an array called heroes. So we have our opening square bracket there and our closing square bracket, and I've comma separated the objects. So we have a Superman object, we have Wonder Woman there, and finally Batman, okay? What you can do is you can use the for each method. So how it works is you type out the name of the array, in this case heroes, and using dot notation we can access the for each method that is inbuilt in JavaScript. So basically what's going to happen is we need to pass in at least one argument to the for each method, and that is going to be a callback function that makes reference to each object. So what I have to do is I have to type in, provide a name, and what that name is going to be, I'm going to call it hero, is actually a reference to each object in our array. So what I can do is I can say console.log and just say console.log each hero, okay? So if I save and refresh, we now get each object inside of the console. Okay, that's awesome. Another thing you can do as well is instead of, logging out to the console each object in its entirety, you can access, one of the key value pairs if you wanted. So you could access, for example, hero.name, and if we save and refresh, we actually get a reference to the name property of each of the objects. So for each is iterating over each object. So hero is a reference to each single object. So we're iterating over, and I can access hero.name. You could, for example, comma separate and also get access to hero.power if you wanted to do that as well. So if I save and refresh, we get Superman and his power, Wonder Woman and her power, Batman and his power. Okay? So guys, that is the for each method in JavaScript. It's built in and it is very useful for iterating over an array of objects.